After watching how this teen treated an elderly lady, cop had to step in. When a torrential downpour started, which had everyone in the parking lot he was in dashing for their cars, there was one elderly woman who was moving a little slower than the rest. When a teen ran over to her, this cop could not believe what he was seeing. Police officer Joe Holt had seen a lot of things during his time on the force in Independence, Missouri. One thing he did not see as often as he would have liked are acts of kindness. Every day he would head out on patrol, respond to calls, and keep the city safe. More often than not, he would see some hard sights. This was why he was so surprised to see teenager Tyria Pryor lend a helping hand to a complete stranger. The teenager at the heart of this touching story is Tyria Pryor. He had always been a good kid and had strived to help people in his community when he saw that they were in need. The elderly woman he sheltered from the rain was just one of the many small acts of kindness he had performed over the years. Officer Holt decided he needed to know more about this kind teen, and after Tyria had finished helping the elderly woman, he approached the vehicle that Tyria had returned to. Inside, it was just him and his mother chatting about the day. Holt knocked on the vehicle window and asked if he could talk to them for a few minutes. Tyria's mother knew how special he was. A lot of sons get to their teenage years and begin to distance themselves from their moms. Not Tyria. He had always had a close relationship with his mother, and his do-good attitude was something she was very proud of her son for. When Officer Holt commended her on having such a great child, she found herself tearing up. Officer Holt had kept something secret, though. When Tyria was helping the woman, he had caught it on camera and planned to do something special with the image. He wanted other people to know about this teen, and social media was the place for that. As soon as Officer Holt got home for the evening, he decided to upload the pictures he had of Tyria to Facebook. Astonishingly, his friends and colleagues began to share the post. Soon enough, the post was being shared by thousands of people around the world. It had gone viral. Now, this unknown teenager was internet famous. The one thing Holt had neglected to ask the teenager for was his name, and he hoped that this post would allow him to find him and give him the recognition he deserved for being a good Samaritan. With all of the attention the post was getting, he was sure it would happen. This is the kind of feel-good story that cops often don't get to tell, which is why Officer Holt became so focused on finding Tyria. He could not use police programs like facial recognition, but instead needed to pound the pavement like the cops of old. He made it his newfound mission to find a good guy rather than a bad guy. It was proving to be quite difficult, though. Tyria was nowhere to be found, and nobody seemed to know the teen. Holt wished he had gotten his name when he had the chance, but this just made him more determined. Not to be discouraged, Officer Holt went back to his Facebook page. The post had been shared by people all over Independence, Missouri, and he knew that eventually he would get a hit. Someone had to know this kid and where he lived. As the days passed, Holt began to lose a bit of hope. That is, until he saw a notification, and it seemed like he might finally have an answer as to who this young man was. After a few days of not hearing anything, a call finally came into the Independence police force. One of Tyria's relatives had seen Holt's posts on Facebook and decided to lend a helping hand. This unknown source gave Officer Holt all of the details they had on Tyria: his name, age, address, and even his school. It was thrilling for Holt to be able to put a name to the face finally, and he decided to go out and find Tyria once more. The city of Independence is not without crime, though. Officer Holt was often kept busy with cases of theft from homes and cars, along with a few cases of arson and other crimes. The city itself has actually been put on the FBI's radar because more cars are stolen in it each year than any other city in the United States. What this means for Officer Holt is that there is never a dull day on the job. Unfortunately, a lot of crimes that are committed in Independence are violent ones. To deal with the increase in crime, Independence often employs a large number of police officers to try and combat this. Officer Holt is one of over 200 police officers in the city who are tasked with keeping the streets safe and making sure that crime is kept at a manageable level. Luckily for Holt, Tyria is one of the good guys. Even though the city has some high crime rates, that does not mean it is a bad place to work. In fact, the police force that Holt is on is one that fosters community involvement. All of the cops are supposed to work together to create a harmonious workplace, where everyone feels at ease with one another. They should all work on supporting their fellow cops and their fellow citizens when they see that they are in need. It was a pretty normal day for Holt when he found himself parked outside of a grocery store. He had not packed a lunch, and since his patrol shift was 12 hours long, he knew he would need to grab some food. Not knowing what he wanted to eat, he decided to head into the grocery store to see what appealed to him. Maybe he wanted a sandwich or a salad. As he was pondering this, he looked up and saw Tyria. Tyria and his mom was also there. This would be the setting for their paths to cross initially and send Holt on his wild goose chase. As a cop, you always need to be aware of your surroundings. Crime can happen at any time, and you need to be vigilant constantly. Officer Holt felt something happening in his periphery and turned towards it. He was on his way into the grocery store, but that was when he saw a flash out of the corner of his eye. A teenager was running towards an elderly woman. He really hoped he wasn't going to see a crime. Ready to spring into action, Holt watched to see what this teen was doing. He had a heavy raincoat on, which he immediately whipped off. Much to his astonishment, the teen, who we now know is Tyria, proceeded to cover the elderly woman with his coat. He slowly helped her walk to her car with her groceries and helped her load up the vehicle. Once she was safely inside, he waved goodbye to her and watched her go on her way. Throughout this interaction, Holt found himself gazing around the parking lot. No other person had thought to help this woman. She was clearly someone who needed a helping hand, but all anyone had cared about was getting into their cars and not getting wet. A little bit of rain had never hurt anyone before, and Holt was surprised that nobody else had thought to help. He needed to know who this boy was. If Tyria had not gone and helped the woman, Officer Holt knew that it would have been his duty to do so. After all, he was charged with protecting the community, and that also meant protecting vulnerable people from the elements. A little bit of rain never hurt anyone, but if someone was to catch a chill, it could be very bad for their health. Tyria made sure this woman was dry and safe. Sometimes it is hard to remember that the world is actually full of good people, and for Officer Holt, it was something that he needed to be reminded of. This small act of kindness was just the sort of thing he needed to feel a sense of fulfillment in his work. He hoped that more teens would learn from Tyria's example and begin to follow suit. He knew that from then on, he would make more of an effort to help out as well. Nowadays, we often only hear about bad things on the news, like crimes involving hate. This story about Tyria worked to bring the entire community together, which Officer Holt was proud of. Instead of a story in which a teen commits a crime, it was a teen helping out his community. Holt wants to see more stories like this and hopes that by his post going viral, more teens will have their eyes open as to what is happening around them. There were a few details that Holt had initially left out. The biggest one was the fact that Tyria was already safe and dry inside his own vehicle when he saw the woman in need. He made a conscious effort to get out of the car into the pouring rain to help someone else. Most people would simply look through the window and then go about their day. They would not care about helping someone they didn't know. The best part about this interaction that Holt witnessed was how nonchalant Tyria was during the whole thing. He was not doing this to put it up on social media and gain recognition. All he wanted to do was the right thing, like it was a normal part of his day. It showed that he had a lot of empathy for those around him and an awareness that a lot of people do not. To Holt, while he may not have wanted recognition, he definitely deserved it. Tyria is African American, and when his mother, Ebony Finley, saw a police officer walking up to her car during their first interaction with Holt, she had become nervous. All Officer Holt wanted to do was to commend her on raising a fine young man. When she heard that, she couldn't believe that this police officer had such kind things to say about her son. It was an extremely touching moment for everyone involved, and Tyria accepted the praise quietly. The last thing Holt added to his Facebook post for Tyria was an open invitation to dinner sometime. Holt wanted the team to know that if they should ever run into each other, he would like to treat him as a thank you from the officer and the city. Tyria and Holt had dinner at Red Lobster together, and we're sure these two will be seeing each other again. With a chance encounter like this one, who's to say it can't happen again? Tyria and Holt finally had their meeting and were interviewed for national television. All Tyria had to say about his kind gesture is that it and others are something he has always done. People have the power to help others, and he recognizes that. We hope that Tyria continues to help people and that, in turn, people help him. He truly is a good Samaritan, and we should all follow in his footsteps in our own communities.